Police may have now finished their investigation into Westminster lockdown parties, but Sue Gray's full report on the matter is set to be published next week.
And joining us now is Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab. So good to speak to you this morning, Mr Raab. Lots to talk to you about. Many people getting in touch with us this morning, and the words they're using to describe the conclusion of this report, with Boris Johnson just having one fine, is that they cannot believe he's escaped this.
Look, the police have investigated this without fear or favour. I appreciate there's been lots of speculation, but that's what the police have found. I think I'm speaking from a government point of view. I think it's right that and welcome that the Metropolitan Police have concluded their investigation. And of course, they find a range of people in number 10 Downing Street, and it's important, and I think the PM would be very clear, he's already apologised. We take the issues very seriously. There's been an overhaul of number 10 since the interim Sue Gray report. Of course, there are lessons to be learned. We're also getting on with the job of the cost of living, the war in Ukraine, and some of the law enforcement crime fighting initiatives that I've been talking about on the media studios this morning.
Have the police been able to explain to you, or has somebody that's spoken to the police in the conclusion of this report been able to explain to you how people who attend the exact same event, one can be fined and one not? Because I think that's the cause of this, isn't it? The cause of this sense that he's got away with it when others haven't.
Well, I don't think anyone could say he's got away with it, because he received a fixed penalty notice in what people would make their own view as to the circumstances. I'm not going to second-guess the police investigation, but of course, in relation, I know from my experience as Justice Secretary that what the police will decide depends on all the facts of the case. So, but that's a judgment for them to decide, and it's quite inappropriate for me to second-guess it.
You can understand, could you understand people's frustration, though, looking from the outside, Mr Raab? Because, as you say, the Prime Minister has apologised for what happened. Number 10 has been the most fined address in the whole of the country. You can understand their frustration and their confusion when they look from the outside and say a number of people have been fined for events that we know the Prime Minister was at.
Look, I do understand the public interest in this and the importance of it, which is why it's important that both the transparency and the accountability has been there, both from the Sue Gray report, which we'll wait for the final version, but also from the police. But I also understand the frustration from many people when I'm knocking on doors who want us to be focused, laser-like focus, on the economy, the cost of living, Ukraine, fighting crime, which I've been talking about this morning. And so we've had that transparency and accountability, and we're getting on with the job while we wait for the final Sue Gray report.
Is there any reason why that hasn't come today? It feels like it could have come as soon as this Met Police investigation had been concluded.
Well, that's not within our control. That's for Sue Gray to decide. But as soon as it comes to us, that the findings will be published, and the PM will go to the House of Commons and take further questions.
Are you looking forward to that actually finally being out there so we can ask you questions about it?
I welcome the transparency and accountability, because I think it's very important for public confidence.
Yeah, and there's no suggestion that you've heard of that one of the reasons why it's been delayed is because she's trying to get certain names in, and actually it's not that she's concluding any kind of report, it's that she wants it published absolutely in full.
I think we always get this speculation pre-reports. I can't comment on it. I don't know. Yeah. The truth is, Sue Gray's a very robust individual. I've met her a number of times before. I'm sure she will handle things the right way according to her judgment, and that's absolutely the proper thing to do.
The message is very much from government that they want to get on with the job, and the message is certainly from number 10 that they want to put this behind them and get on with the job. But it's only really conversations with you and perhaps holding up, because we're talking about this now and we're going to want to get on to talk about crime, that's been prevented, hasn't it? Because there was nothing to stop measures to deal with the cost of living crisis going ahead, nothing to stop with the windfall tax being brought in. So it's a strange justification to say you're stopping us getting on with the job when we're just asking questions. I know you didn't personally, but that's the debate.
Well, that may be the debate. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think that it's not a question of what number 10 or what we, the politicians, want. I think your viewers, our constituents, the public, do expect our energies, our focus to be 100% on them, and that's why what we're doing on the cost of living is so important. The Prime Minister's leadership on Ukraine, the measures that I'm taking with Home Secretary, with the Attorney General on fighting crime, but also preventing young people getting to crime. Look, I think that understandably people want to make sure that we're 110% focused on that. But I'm not going to comment on the commentary. That's never a good idea for a politician.
OK, can we talk about what it is that you want to talk about this morning, which is this £300 million that you're giving to local councils to help support and prevent youth offending. We had a really interesting discussion earlier on in the show between Eddie Hearn, who is a boxing promoter I'm sure you're aware of, and Peter McCabe, who is one of the members of Headway, which is a charity that deals with head injuries, about boxing. I know one of the things that you're very passionate about, Mr. Raab, is boxing. You were an amateur boxer yourself of some repute. You got an Oxford at a Blue at university, and we saw you yesterday with a young person hitting the pads, and clearly it's something you enjoy still to this day. Big question about whether actually within the realm of what you're trying to do to help prevent youth offending, whether supporting boxing clubs is a good idea, or actually should be trying to avoid putting children and young people into sports that could damage their health and damage and offer brain injury. I wonder what your perspective on it is.
Thank you, and can also just thank GMB for coming up to Blackpool to have a look at that particular initiative. It's really important to shine a light on those harder to reach youngsters in communities that have suffered a period of disadvantage or deprivation. My view on it is that I know from my own personal experience when my father died when I was 12, that karate and then later on boxing were very important in terms of not just physical fitness, but also the role models, the respect, the ethos, a bit of focus in life that it gave me at a fragile time. And I'm a middle-class home counties boy. So I think for whether it's in Blackpool or I used to be a trustee at Fight for Peace in Newham, I think it has a great scope for giving some focus, some motivation, some inspiration for those young people, and what you can then do when you've got them in a sporting environment. And it's not just boxing or karate. It could be football, it could be drama, it could be the arts. You can put that wraparound care, that mentoring that keeps them on the straight and narrow and helps us keep communities safer because you cut crime. On the health issue, boxing is so well regulated, and you look at the sports like rugby that are now much more regulated in the past. I think you just got to ask yourself a basic question, which is, do they do more harm than good for those harder to reach communities and those harder to reach youngsters? They undoubtedly, in my experience, my experience working at Fight for Peace, I've got a great boxing club, the Foley, in my constituency, which I still train at, and they'd be on my case if I didn't give them a shout out. They undoubtedly do more harm than good. And so, yes, we need to make sure, and amateur boxing is very well regulated, actually, we need to make sure we protect those youngsters. But if you look at all the positives, and Eddie Hearn, I'm sure, will have spoken to that as well, I think the balance sheet is clearly in favour.
Well,
and it won't be right for everyone.
You won't be surprised to know, Mr. Raab, that the CEO that we had on from Headway, the charity that doesn't get support from you, sees it very differently, and he thinks there is more harm than good, because he says it's all very well to see the mentoring and those definitely very quantifiable things, but that could happen with many other sports and pastimes if the government invested in those other sports and pastimes. And actually, his unit, which sees he showed us a huge box of files of people from injuries of varying degrees from boxing, neurologically, he said that you don't support that either. So it's very easy sometimes, isn't it, to argue that in communities where there is violence and communities where there's deprivation, boxing works, but actually if the government invested in other things, that would work too.
So I think there's an element of that, which is why I said it's not just about boxing, but it's also about other sports and also drama and arts. Children, particularly at a young and tender and fragile age, will be inspired and enthused by other things. And so our £300 million investment is not just into one thing. I guess people have asked me about karate and boxing because that was close to my heart and my experience, but it's not just about that. But what I would say, I do think there is just a little bit of prejudice and, frankly, ignorance about what the alternative is for some of those kids who are not going to be going and you're going to get to go to the theatre or to go and do music and who come from a grittier background, for whom boxing or martial arts has meant the difference between getting involved in drugs, getting involved in gangs, getting involved in knives. And I think you've got to, for some of those tougher communities, look at what that stark choice is. So I don't think there's one size fits all. The boxing injuries that people talk about tend to be for people who have done, you know, a whole range of amateur and in the professional ranks. It's a whole different business altogether.
The CEO of Headway would take issue with that, but we'll let him take up that debate with you.
Right.
Anyone that's done a political interview would know you're a heavyweight, but we've managed to uncover you at your boxing height, which may make you a pin-up, I would suggest too.
What was your boxing weight, Mr. Raab?
Light heavy, but I fought it once at heavyweight as well.
Did
well, there
you?
you go.
And is there still ambition in there? I imagine after a busy day and when you've been on the media rounds, you'd quite like to take to the Foley, the boxing club that you're a member of, and have a spar. Is there still ambition to have a few more bouts, a few more contests?
I think my fighting days are over, but Gary Ball and John and the team down at the Foley Boxing Club in Thames Ditton do a great job. And my boys play football on a Sunday, so I don't get down there as much as I used to. But don't worry, I've got a punch bag in my garage, so I can still let off a bit of steam.
Oh, whose face is on that?
Whose face is on it mostly?
Not yours, don't worry.
OK, all right, we'll end it there. All right,
Mr. Raab, Dominic Raab, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good to talk to you.